Hi there, and welcome to the Jane Anderson Show. I am so thrilled that you are here. As you probably know, we talk all about women in consulting and particularly women with influence and who are working in the business to business space, particularly who are thought leaders, content creators, influencers, and experts in their field. We have a very, very special guest today, and I wanted to introduce you to her. So, our guest today, she is an internationally recognized expert at fully connected leadership and communication. She's a trusted mentor to executives and leaders in a highly sought after speaker and trainer. Her clients include associations, non-profits, government, as well as iconic brands such as BlueScope Steel, Westpac, Toll, and Microsoft. And you might have seen her in the media such as Smart Company, This Working Life, Sky Business News, and CEO Magazine. She's known for helping leaders and teams achieve real connection and sustained engagement. And she's really passionate about encouraging organisations to talk about menopause in the workplace. She's been recognised by Leaders Hum in the top 200 biggest voices in leadership globally, and she's one of only 7 Australians on that list. She's also the host of the podcast This Connected Life. She's the author of 2 books and the best-selling Fully Connected and the Social Association. Please welcome Mel Kettle. Welcome, Mel. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. It's so exciting to have you here. I know how busy you are, so thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much, Jane. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Mel, we've known each other for some time, and your journey always fascinates me in terms of the incredible experience that you've had and to date coming through to the practice of that you have today. Are you happy to share a little bit about your journey and how you got to where you are now?
Oh, absolutely. So I think I've had quite an eclectic career, and whenever I share some of my experiences, people always say, wow, how have you done so much?
Exactly.
And I started out, my first job was clicking a clicker to count people who were going into a ski resort in the Snowy Mountains. And it was a university holiday job for my dad's firm, who were management consultants. And we stayed in this amazing house in Jindabyne for a week. The weather was atrocious, so I did 1 day of clicking because the weather was just too bad for the rest of the trip. So I had this luxury week in this amazing house and decided that I'd like to work as a consultant one day.
A better gig than me, than the clicking.
Absolutely. Took a long time for me to get to the consultant. Like, it was another 20 years, but I got there in the end. So I went from that.
Out of curiosity, so you've come from, your dad having, coming through this sort of world. What was it that sort of, what did you like about what you saw when you were growing up with what he was doing?
So Dad didn't become a consultant until I was in year 12. So
Okay.
he worked in federal, state and local government when I was a child. And when I was in year 12, he left his job as the chief town planner for Gosford City Council to work as a consultant in a global management consultancy, traffic management consultancy. And he brought the town planning the town planning business to that organisation in Sydney. And it was a few years after that he went out on his own and hung up his own consulting shingle.
Wow.
What I loved about it when he went out on his own was that he had the freedom and the flexibility to live the life he wanted to live. Right. So he started that when he was 55 so that he could access his super and use his super to buy the building that he used or the office space that he used for his practice, and to have a bit of income coming in the short term while he got it up and running. He and Mum, from when he was 55 until he died when he was 71, he worked really hard, but he also played quite hard. So he traveled a lot. He went to the US every year to go to the American Planning Association conference on the West Coast in winter so he could have a ski trip at the same time. And I thought, yes, that's what I want. That's what I want. And so in 2006, when I quit my job in government to become a consultant, the number one reason was because I wanted to have 12 weeks of holidays a year.
Right.
And I've done that once.
Great reason.
In 17 years, I've done that once. And in fact, I've just come back from a week in Singapore, which
Yes.
was my first ever holiday while consulting where I didn't have to do any work.
Really?
So I've always had a holiday with a laptop, and while I took my laptop on this holiday, I only opened it to work out where we were going for dinner, and to book a few tickets for different shows and different, experiences, and to check my emails for 5 minutes a day.
Oh, that's
And
impressive.
it was amazing. It
Was
was
it?
amazing. And all I could think when we were on the plane home was, why is this holiday only 1 week and not 4 weeks?
Really? Wow. That's a
It
real,
was
we talk about living the dream. This is a big part of, being able to have this type of life, isn't it? And this type of practice, seeing that from your dad and the inspiration of that to today, and really, and I know that's something that you really is a big part of how you live. You talk a lot about this in your work when you're helping people. What are some of, how do you do, for those who are listening, they're probably going, wow, this sounds cool. This is the kind of life that I'd like, this life of freedom and choice and independence and control over your own work and life. Tell us about the type of practice that you run so that you can do all this.
So what I do today is quite different from what I do when I started. So when I started, I was much more of a typical consultant where I sold time for money. A lot of the work I did in the early years was writing annual reports and corporate reporting, doing a lot of operational communication work for my clients. So writing newsletters and writing articles, and then that morphed into doing some strategy development, and then that morphed into running the practice as I do now, where I run a lot of workshops and masterclasses, and I do some training and a lot of mentoring and coaching. So the work I do now doesn't have a deadline, whereas the work I used to do was very deadline focused, with strategies and with, corporate reports and annual reports that had a hard deadline that couldn't be moved.
Okay.
When I shifted away from doing work with a hard deadline that had a lot of other people involved in the mix to get to that deadline,
Yes.
I cannot tell you the difference it made to my well-being and my stress.
Yes.
I didn't fully appreciate how stressful it was doing that kind of deadline-driven work until I stopped doing it. So while obviously now, if I'm doing a workshop or some training, there's a deadline in that I'm presenting on a particular day,
Yes.
but really follow the ethos now of develop once and use often. So I've got a lot of IP that I recycle and that I use in different ways, and that I recycle it, but I constantly add to it with new readings and new learning and new experiences and new behaviors that I observe. And so I love the work I do now so much more than I loved what I used to do. And because of the nature of the work that I do now, I have much more control over my calendar,
Yes.
because there's flexibility in dates that we choose to do things. So I very rarely will do delivery kind of work. So running a masterclass or a workshop, for example, on a Monday or a Friday. For the right thing, I will, but my preference is to not.
Yes.
It also means that I can look at my calendar in September, October for the following year and say, this is what I want to do in that year. I want to have these holidays. I want these days off. Sean, my husband's booked this time off work, so I'll book time off work then as well. And that gives me, I don't know, 100 or 120 days in which I can book in things.
Yes.
And because I've got such a great reputation with what I do, I'll frequently have clients coming to me and saying, can you do this event on the 25th of May? And I'll say, no, I'm really sorry, I'm not available. And they'll say, oh, when would you be available?
Yeah.
We can change the date because we want you.
Isn't that great?
Oh, it's so great. Yeah, it's so great.
That's a lot of work to get to that point, Mel. Like you've done some incredible work. The organizations you've worked with, the programs you've delivered, stages you've spoken on, and the books that you've written. You've written how many books?
I've written 2 books. The first one that came out in 2018 is called The Social Association. And I wrote that book for associations and nonprofits who were unsure about how to use social media. So the book steps them through the skills that they need to have in order to be able to use social media to create an online community with their members and their supporters. And I wrote that book because they were my primary client base at the time, and nobody ever writes anything for associations or any other member-based organisation.
Yeah, like we think about these books that, we think about New York Times bestsellers, and we think about these, these big scale, sort of big distribution books. But you're right, like that's a really narrow, no one's written anything for them. I don't think I've ever seen anything written for that market. And so what happened, because our fear sometimes is, what if I write this book and there's not enough clients and there's not enough people, and, but you already had positioning with this market. You already had these people on your list. What was the result of that?
So that book generated an enormous amount of work for me, which was great.
In a good way?
In some ways it was a good way.
Okay.
When I wrote my second book, one of my book coaches said to me, think about the work that you want to do for the next 2 years, because that's the work that's going to be generated as a result of that book. Yeah. And if someone had said that to me when I was writing the Social Association, I never would have written the Social Association. Right. Because by the time the book came out, I didn't want to do that work anymore. But I had positioned myself extremely well in that sector, and so that work came to me, and that work still comes to me, and I am fortunately in the position where I can weigh up, do I want to do it or not? I can position myself with quite a high fee to do that work, knowing that if they say no, then that's fine, because it's not a lot of the time it's not the work that I love to do. I mean, I still love developing strategies. And so if an association comes to me and says, can you help us work out our business strategy or our communication strategy or our social media strategy, I will nearly always say yes, because I love that work. Okay. But if someone says to me and says, can you do some training on how we can better use Facebook, 99% of the time it's a hard no.
Okay. Right. So you're really particular about the strategic side of it, as opposed to, the
training side, and more the training side of it. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I don't keep up to date with all of the changes in social media. It's changing so frequently. And there's a lot of other people who do that work and who do it really, really well. So I would far rather refer work to them in those areas than say yes and do it, not the best job.
Great. And so you've come out of that. So it sounds like that book sort of consolidated some positioning. And so you still get the pull rather than the push type work that comes in. Yeah. And then you've gone on to write this book. Amazing. Tell us all about Fully Connected. This is Fully Connected, how great leaders prioritize themselves, reclaim their energy, and find joy. Tell us all about this. And I'm loving the bookmark, by the way.
Thank you.
Collateral bits and pieces that come along with it.
And mine has the #1 Amazon bestseller sticker that yours doesn't, because I sent yours out before
I got mine early.
#1 on Amazon. That's right.
Yeah.
I love this book.
Yeah.
This book was extremely painful to write because I poured so much of my heart and soul into it. Right. But I love the work that I'm getting as a result of this book. I love the work around this book. And I love it so much because the book talks about how do you prioritize yourself. And because I prioritize myself, it's provided me with opportunities, and it's provided me with greater respect. And one of the things that I'm really firm on are my boundaries. I've got really clear boundaries about how I work and live and play, and around who I have in my life and who I spend time with. And it's taken me a long time to realize that boundaries are not only good for me, but they're good for other people. Yes. Because it helps them understand more about what I do and don't accept. Right. And I really believe that when you have an interaction with somebody who's got clear boundaries, that they know how to communicate frequently and compassionately, that helps you realize that maybe you're not making the best decisions in all aspects of your life. maybe there are ways that you can say no to doing the thing that doesn't light you up, or that you feel obligated to do, or that you're only saying yes to do because you don't want the argument or the dissent or the hard conversation that's going to come about because you've said no.
Right.
Or maybe you're saying yes to things because you have this sense of obligation out of a moral sense of duty that is contrived.
Right. You just walk your talk with this. This is what I so admire about you, because I mean you've moved to the Sunshine Coast, and you know you do there's certain things I really admire that you do. Like you go, okay, well I'm happy to get on a plane, but I'll get on a plane for if I've got to go to Sydney, but I've got to do is how many of those you do? Is it one a month?
One a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
one a month.
You're really, adamant about this and really disciplined with it, because it's so easy. We go, yep, okay, I'm going to do that. And then we sort of go, oh, okay, well, they kind of want this and they want that. So we kind of accommodate it. But you just stay so tight on it. What's your secret with that? Because I reckon we're not in a job anymore, and we're our own boss. And that comes with freedom, but it comes with discipline.
It does come with discipline, and I think it also comes with a responsibility to yourself as well. In the early days I said yes to everything, and I was pretty miserable when it came to a lot of the work I was doing. And I remember being in a hotel room in Istanbul, or an apartment in Istanbul, on holidays. I was away for 7 weeks on my own. My husband couldn't come.
Wow.
And this was about week 3 or week 4 of this holiday. And I just remember thinking, I'm really unhappy. Like, I've made some really poor work choices, and how do I extricate myself from some of these?
Right.
And that holiday was a really good circuit breaker to help me review what I was doing and think about what was important to me. And because I was on my own, I had a lot of time to think through these things. And because I wasn't working, or I was doing a bit of work, but one of the things that annoyed me is I had this one client who I had said to, my term with you will end on this date. It has to end on that date. I'm going overseas the following week. I'm not doing work on this holiday. And they said, please, please, please. And so I capitulated and ended up having to do 1 day a week of work on this holiday. And by the 3rd day of this work, I was just thinking, I hate the work. I don't like the people. They haven't respected my boundaries, and I let them disrespect my boundaries.
Right.
So I've got complete control over this.
Right.
Why am I ceding that control to somebody else?
Yes.
And so often when it comes to boundaries, we forget that there's so many things in life we've got control over, and that we make choices over, and that we make decisions about. And the number of times I hear people saying, I had no choice.
Yes.
You always have a choice.
Right.
You always have a choice.
Yeah.
You might not like the consequences of making a different choice, but you've always got a choice.
Right. That's such valuable advice, Mel. I love how adamant you are on this with not only yourself, like you are the walking, breathing example of this. And I find it so inspiring, and so just
Thanks, Jane.
how tough you are on this, because I think in this game, it's hard. Like
it is hard.
It's hard because you have ultimate freedom and ultimate control. And to be able to say, no, when you're going, okay, well, but I'm desperately trying to grow my practice, and I'm trying to get as many clients. But what I love about this is it's held your value. Like you are saying, I always think of, what is it? Robert Greene, who wrote 48 Laws of Power, and he talks about scarcity increasing your value. Like so you're not showing up to everything. You're not, but that sort of, because you're not at everything and you're not showing up every 5 minutes, is that actually creates greater value. That, okay, well, we've got to value Mel's time. If she's going to be doing it, we know that she values us as a client. She values her time. And you do there's another thing you do that's really great, and that I think is really valuable, not just for personal development, but for leaders, and particularly for women in consulting, is you have your Connected Learners program too. Tell us about that.
Oh, thanks, Jane. My Connected Learners program is an online book club for people who love to learn but don't have time to read. So each month I talk about 3 or 4 or 5 books, nonfiction, on a certain theme that I've read over the last few months, and I talk about the key highlights of that book and how they have lessons, or how they have information that can be relevant to leaders today. So there's information on my website at melkettle.com if you'd like more information. But I started it because I wasn't reading enough nonfiction. Like I love crime fiction. I read every crime thriller that I can get my hands on. And I was realizing that I needed to read more nonfiction, and I was recognizing that my ability to serve my clients wasn't as good as it could be because I wasn't staying up with the latest in different aspects. So I thought, how do I hack myself? And our mutual friend, Rebecca Southerns in Canada, runs a similar book club called Wiser by Choice. And I rang her and said, can I nick your idea? And she went, yes, of course. I went, great. Thank you.
I love that. How good is it you can get on a call and call someone, call the person. I love that.
Exactly. And she's just so generous and beautiful as well. So it was, to get her blessing was a big relief.
Oh, it's great. I've been to your Connected Learners program. I'm a big fan of it because this is, I reckon, the number one. Well, I think you tap into every challenge that women in consulting have. One is being able to manage your boundaries, being able to stay particularly connected with yourself, and really finding that work and joy that you love in your work. And then, but the other one is that we've got to innovate. We've got to stay ahead of the game. We've got to, our clients are relying on us to be looking ahead and being the navigator and saying, look, this is coming up, be aware of this. And I remember the one we did was around creativity. And so for those who are listening, you want to jump on, Mel, I said, is like the Margaret Pomerantz of books, of nonfiction. It was fabulous. So you certainly hacked it, and hacked it for me. So I'll be back. So for those, but this is something, I know you and I have come from the era of knowing that we've got to read typically a book a week, but hacking it, getting into Blinkist and any of those sorts of ways to be able to keep the thinking going, staying ahead of the thinking. And I love that you've gone, I need to create some accountability for myself, so I'll hack it and anyone else can come as well. I love that.
I'm thinking, I was in Target about a month ago, and I thought I need to do one that says the 5 books I bought in Target today. Or Big W, wherever I was, because there were 5 really cool self-help books.
Right.
And I went, oh yeah, I want all those. I bought 3 of them.
I love it. So Mel, with the programs that you run, tell us a bit about the type of programs you run now. Are you still with, you've got some corporate, some public market. How does it kind of work, and what are you working on now?
Yeah, so I work with leaders and teams to help them communicate, to create real connection and sustained engagement. And I have my master program is called Connected Leaders, which is which is run in-house. It's a blend of masterclasses, keynote presentations at a main all company event, if that's something that you do. It's group coaching, it's one-on-one mentoring, it's workshops, it's activities to do in between. And that runs for between 6 and 12 months, depending on what your needs are. And I also do more individualized one-off or series of masterclasses and workshops that can either run from, a 45-minute lunch and learn to something that goes over a few days, and with a blend of online or in person, depending on, where your people are and what works for you. And what works for me as well, keeping in mind with my boundaries. And one of the things I'm developing at the moment is an online program for people who want me but don't need me as a part of a bigger corporate, or they might want to learn some of the things that I have to offer, but don't have the money for the investment for a one-on-one mentoring or coaching program, but want something. So that I'm still mapping out what that's going to look like, but there'll be something launching hopefully at the end of June, early July. So stay tuned. You can sign up to my newsletter to get information about that. And I also I'm just reinvigorating my monthly masterclass, which is a free 45-minute masterclass. The first one is next week on beating burnout.
Oh,
and the topics will be related to what's in the book, Fully Connected, but they're leadership, communication, connection, engagement topics. So what are some of the challenges that leaders are facing today, and how can you overcome those?
Right. I love the diversity, yet the focus of what you talk about, Mel. And so you've got corporate programs, you've got there's some things even sort of almost for female leaders, and you talk about, I think you're one of the real pioneers that were first talking about menopause at work a few years ago, which is such a hot topic now, but you've been talking about this for ages. Are you happy to share a little bit about what's happening in that space and what you've noticed in the trends? Because you're always ahead of the curve.
Yeah, so I've been talking about menopause at work and why we need to have conversations about menopause in the workplace probably since maybe 2015. And I wrote a menopause blog for a while, but it was hacked recently and it's just all too hard to get it back. So I'll probably restart that at some stage. But I go part of the how do you connect with others and how do you connect and engage is how do you understand what people are going through? How do you support your staff and your team so that they feel valued? And for women in their 40s and 50s, one of the biggest challenges that we face is perimenopause and menopause. And for me, when I went through it, I had no idea what was happening. And my doctor told me that I was too young because I was in my early 40s when I started going through perimenopause. And she just said to me, "You're way too young. All your weight gain is because you're eating too much. Your anxiety is because you're just too stressed." And none of that was helpful. And so I started doing research and finding out that such a massive portion of women who go through perimenopause they're increased. They feel more stressed, they feel more anxious, they're more likely to have depression, they have a whole heap of physical symptoms like night sweats and hot flushes and dry skin, and their hair falls out, and so many things that have an impact on how you think about yourself and how you are physically and emotionally capable of showing up and doing your job. And so how do you, as an employer, support women who are going through this so that they feel like they're valued, they feel that they're seen, they feel that they are understood, and they are more likely to show up and do the job that you want them to do? There's a portion of women, I think it's 5% of women, resign from their job because they don't believe that they can do their job and go through menopause at the same time.
Really?
And so think about what that would look like for your workplace if you suddenly lost 5% of the women in your workplace. And the other data shows us that at any given time, approximately 20% of the workplace is going through perimenopause. So that's a huge portion. But think about it, it's women in their 40s and 50s, and that makes up about 20% of the population.
And a lot of that's leadership roles.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Highly skilled.
And at the height of our careers in our 40s and 50s as well. And so to suddenly have this whole emotional shit show that happens for so many women going through perimenopause and menopause, it's really debilitating. And it makes you second guess yourself and feel less than. And like, I know when I was going through it, I thought I was going through early onset Alzheimer's because I was forgetting everything. And I had extreme anxiety, which I'd never had before, to the point of, at the time, Sean, my husband, was working on the Gold Coast and we were living in Brisbane. And he would text me and say, "I'm leaving work." And it took 42 minutes for him to get from his office to our house. If he wasn't home within 50 minutes, I would assume he'd been in a car accident and was dead.
Oh, wow.
And that was an assumption I made once a week. So you can just imagine what that was doing to my mental health.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
The other thing I'm thinking too is that age group. So you're talking Gen X that are, and
Yay for Gen X.
yeah, this is the sandwich generation too, because they've got little ones plus, or children at home, and they've got elderly parents sometimes living with them. So and then throw menopause on top of that if they're female, like the pressure that's just coming with all that. Is the need for, and then people go, why have we not got women in senior leadership roles? And you're like, well, hello. Look at the pressure that's, and organizations are just not set up for supporting them. So
that's it. And I reckon COVID has had such a hugely positive impact on Gen X women who are going through menopause at the moment, because working from home means that you've got more flexibility in terms of the hours in which you have to do your job. But it also means that if you're having a hot flush, and if you've got, like, I've got friends who will have a hot flush and then they'll throw up. It's just a symptom that, there's not many of them. Thankfully, it's not the most common of side effects. But could you imagine if they were in an office and having that? So at least when you're home, you've got more privacy and you've got more control over the temperature in the room and what you wear and how you can have a nap if you need to in the middle of the day to just recoup your energy to get through the rest of the day.
Yeah.
And so working from home has been an absolute blessing for so many women for that reason, as well as managing all the personal stuff for kids and the parents and life in general.
Incredible. I just think you're really, your expertise in this space, plus all the study in the intro, Willa, we've talked about, because you come from you've got a master's in health promotion. And so, all this context that you have around this type of work and the challenges, but you're so seeing the future. And I think the work that you're doing is just so important. This is Lone Ranger type stuff. I remember when you first started talking about it. And, you were a lone voice for some time.
I was, and it was really hard because nobody wanted to know. And I just sort of slid it into a lot of conversations with a lot of people I was working with. And so now there's so many more women talking about it and talking about menopause in the workplace professionally. And I'm so grateful because it's improving the lives of so many women. And you were saying my expertise and my experience brought me to this, and I've got a master's in business in marketing and a master's in public health, and I don't know anyone else in Australia that has that blend of qualifications that is using it in the way that I'm using it.
Yeah, you've really carved out your own path, Mel, which is a big part of this. You're a real trailblazer.
Yeah, thanks, Jane.
And Mel, on reflection on that, for those who are listening, like they're kind of probably going, far out. I don't know if I could, that's a long time. 2015, you started talking about it. It's now 2023. You got to love what you do and love what you're talking about. This isn't something that you've just gone, that's popular. That's thing that's, it's turning up in SEO results everywhere.
Yeah.
You've really gone in on what you've been most passionate about and what you most want to drive.
Sorry, just to interrupt. I know we had conversations about the menopause work that I'm doing a long time ago, and I made a deliberate decision to not go hard and fast into that because I didn't want to be pigeonholed as the menopause person. Because I'm not a doctor or I don't talk about it in terms of how do you, as a woman, look after yourself. I mean, I do in terms of some aspects, but not from a medical or a healthcare perspective. It's more from a mindset perspective. And how you can look after yourself, as we should all be looking after ourselves. But it fits so well into all of the other work that I do.
It does.
And that's what I love about it.
Yeah, I think about your work a bit like, we've come out of Thought Leaders Business School years ago, and I remember Matt Church talking about you've got your commercial IP, which is, coming out of leaders, teams, strategic comms, and then you've got your personal IP, which is some of the things you've had to learn and sometimes bringing that through, and then you've got your legacy IP. And I love exactly what you said, is that Jason Fox talks about crusades, and it's really easy to get caught up in a crusade. And that was probably one of the things that you had you found a platform in a way to be able to talk about it without it competing with all the great work you were doing, and that was commercially smart at the time, people understanding how to buy. Now this is dabbling into a well-being area that's a fairly new space. You've still got your positioning because you've really written some good body of work around commercially smart work, and now I think that work will start to the context and some of the credibility that you have in that space will sort of, like you said, it sort of peppers in here and there of where it fits. So, and Mel, for those who are listening and just in awe of you, as I always am in terms of what you do, when you're very experienced and you've had your practice for some time, if you think about some of the lessons learned, or if you had your time again in your practice, what are some of the things that you might say to people if they're thinking about doing or going this way, or they're trying to grow their practice?
The things that I think I have a lot of people who come to me for advice on how to quit their job and become a consultant. And I have had, over the years, I've lost track of how many people have said to me, I want to do what you do. You make it look really easy.
You do.
Let me tell you, it is not really easy. It is hard work. And working for yourself is definitely not something that is right for everybody. So think long and hard before you make that leap as to whether or not you want to be putting yourself out there. You want to be, singing your own praises all of the time, because you need to do that. You need to be picking up the phone and making phone calls to prospective clients. You need to be valuing your worth. And even after nearly 17 years in business, I still look at proposals and go, oh my God, am I quoting too much? Am I not quoting enough? What's the value here? What's the value that they're going to see? Are they going to think that how did she charge that much? What's she doing? And you have to put all of that aside, and you really have to have a deep, deep, deep self-confidence if you want to make it.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that, then you need to work on that first.
Right. So work on your self-confidence. Know this is what you've got to be prepared to go deep in the IP, but also deep into
you.
What you said, into you.
Yeah. And you need to have I think you need to have a high level of self-awareness, because if you don't, then you won't understand how people perceive you. Or you'll think that they perceive you in a completely different way to what you are. So, really you need to have good self-awareness. You need to be able to take action, and you need to know what motivates you and drives you. And you need to have some really good self-care practices in place so that you look after yourself, because you need to show up to do the work. There's no one else if you get sick. Or if you just don't want to, you have to do that work yourself. And so the more you can look after your physical and emotional and mental health, the better off you'll be, and the easier you'll find it.
I remember reading a quote by what's the name of the futurist? Dr. Graham Codrington, and he talked about the future of work is around building that brand. In fact, did you see the front cover of a Harvard Business Review yesterday?
I did. I got my copy yesterday and I smiled and went, ha.
I haven't seen it. For those going, it says how to build your personal brand, communicate your value to the world. It was like, wow, look at that. And you're right. And it talks a lot about that in there. And Graham Codrington talks about the futurist who wrote about personal brand back in 2015 in he wrote, it was in it wasn't Forbes, it was in Entrepreneur magazine at the time. But what you're saying is exactly what they say is around. It's all self-management, self-care, being able to self-administration, like just being able to, because a big part of this is not just being able to run your practice, but being able to run a life that sits around it as well, your boundaries. I know someone in our community the other day got a personal chef recently, and they thought, oh, I feel a bit, can I do that? Don't only celebrities do something like that? But this is a different life. You've got to work out what is the best use of your time, and you're going to be doing sometimes things that other people around you that aren't in this world might think, who the hell do you think you are, getting a personal chef or getting a cleaner or getting a housekeeper or getting someone that does all these things. But it's how having a self-awareness that you just can't do everything, and managing those boundaries, I think, is such valuable advice, Mel.
And it really is about identifying what do you love to do the most in the world, and who are the most important people that you want to spend time with, and working out how do you do more of that. I say to my clients, you need to be doing things every single day that you love. So think about what are the 2 or 3 things that you love the most, and do at least one of those every day. And for me, it's walking on the beach and it's reading for pleasure. And I do one, if not both of those things every single day. And that, like, if I can be having the most crap day, and I'll just visualize myself in bed at 9:30 with a book that I'm reading for enjoyment.
Right.
And I'll think that'll get me through. How many hours until it's 9:30? Not that many.
Okay.
And if it's been a really bad day, I'll be in bed at 7:30 with the book.
Right, with your book. Mel, you've been so generous and shared such valuable insights today, particularly around your journey is so interesting. And I think you're a real inspiration for those who are going, I've particularly government, sometimes going, I only know government. Would people really work with me who are outside government? But you're a testament that, you can take an area of expertise and take that across a lot of different industries, different types of people who have specific challenges in their roles. A testament to being able to always staying ahead of the curve. 2 books that you've written, and really insightful books. And you've really tapped into, what I love about this is you've just gone into, I know my customers, I know my clients so well. These are the problems that they're having. Being able to tap into some things that you really love to do, and really going deep. Particularly, I love your thinking, as we've talked about in the past, around your boundaries thinking, the work around the menopause, and this balance of leadership and well-being that you sort of dance across so beautifully. And then for those, and just for those who are women listening to this who are thinking, maybe I don't know if I can do this or not, is to be able to see, well, here's what Mel's done, and here's the version of it that she's been able to create for herself, and she eats, sleeps, and breathes her message, and how much you've got to believe that. So thanks for sharing all your insights today, Mel. Particularly, I love the one around self-awareness too. So Mel, if people want to learn more about you, if they'd like to follow you, see all the great work you're doing, where would you like them to go?
So you can start with my website, melkettle.com, or LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter. And if you just Google Mel Kettle, I think I own the first 3 or 4 pages of Google when you type my name in.
You've got a nice, unique name. I like it.
I do. There's 2 other Mel Kettles that I have come across, and they both work in comms. One of them's a man in the UK, and I discovered him about 7 years ago when I got a Google alert and on my name. And I'm reading the alert going, I don't remember saying that. I don't remember saying that. I don't remember being interviewed for that magazine. And then, of course, it wasn't me. It was a man in the UK who works in comms in the transportation sector for a train company. And then there's a young girl somewhere, or she's probably not young anymore. She was young when I first came across her about 15 years ago. And her name is Mel Kettle as well. Also in PR. She's in PR.
Oh, really?
I know. How funny is that?
That's such a coincidence that you're all comms. I love it.
I know, but I own the name in the internet world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Mel. We're cheering you on. We can't wait to see where you take your practice next. And, we're in your corner and really keen to see where you go with all your great work. Keep up the great work and keep on inspiring us all.
Oh, thanks so much, Jane. It's been great to talk to you again.